Welcome everybody, it's Phil back with the Professional Painter and Decorator. I'm doing what you ask, People have said to me, Phil, you try out all these paints, and if you look in that playlist there, I try some unusual paints out, don't I? Probably paints you've never even heard of. But today we're coming, I don't want to say coming back down to basics, because it's not quite basics, but we're going to come back onto the, let's not even say budget paints, Valspar Trade. Now, you'll remember a while back, Mike from the Decorating Forum, please check out the Decorating Forum on Facebook. He managed to get through Valspar Trade, some vouchers. And he sent them out to a select, I'll say very select few painters and decorators to try out some of the paints. And if you've been watching recently, it depends when you're watching this video, there's a playlist there of the flat renovation that I did earlier this year, and I tried some Valspar paints out. Now, some are better than others, I'll say no more, but one of the paints that I've not really reviewed is their undercoat and a water-based gloss. Now, people have asked me what's water-based glosses like when it comes down to cheap budget paints. I don't want to say too cheap, but you know what I mean. Just something you can get from B&Q, just straight off the shelf. So we're going to do Doris the Door. Doris the Door has been painted in a nice satin finish at some stage. Can't remember when I did that. It's been that long since we've done videos like this. And I've done the usual prep. It's been nicely nibbed down and rubbed down, so we've got a key on there, and we've just given it a dust down and a tack rag. Now, yeah, you've seen a paper motion in the corner. Paper motion in the corner just relates to the Amazon affiliation links that I've got below this in the description. There's a few bits and pieces that I will link in videos if it helps you out to purchase, so you've got the products that I'm using. If you do purchase off those links, I get it. Don't get carried away. I get a small commission, just a small commission. It doesn't cost you anything. It just helps me as a creator on YouTube to finance things. But it is literally a small commission. So if you want to buy some Merca Gold Flex sanding pads, bits and pieces like that, and tack rags, tack cloths, there'll probably be a link down below in the description. And while I've got your attention, those people that are buying me a coffee, thank you very much. Those people that are still giving me super thanks, which is there or there, just under that bar there, thank you very much, much appreciated. So without further ado, let's talk about this paint. Right, I'm back. Let's talk about the paint. We've done the, well, they've got, what do we call it? The prenuptials, yeah, you know what I mean. Prenuptials. We've done the prenuptials. Right, the paints that I've not tried yet, well, I have tried them because I have used them on bits and pieces, so I know what they're like. But what we're going to do, Doris the Door's ready to go. And to start with, I won't show you painting it. You've seen plenty of doors being painted. I'm going to be using the Valspar Trade, and this is the Knot Blocker Wood Primer and Undercoat. Now, this is a water-based product, and I'll read the tin so we don't forget anything. It's a low odour, so there shouldn't be so much smell to it. And this will be preventing bleed through from wood knots. It's a water-based product. Can it work? We haven't got any knots on Doris. And it provides strong adhesion, and it's quick drying, and this is white. Now, the reason I'm using this to the layman, straight the DIY, semi-pro, people who are just wanting a turnaround, let's call it an easy turnaround, acrylic based or whatever it is based, because it's got not blocking, it sounds like it's on not blocking primer properties and adhesion. This as an undercoat prior to finishing with a water-based gloss or the Valspar water-based satin is a good all-rounder base undercoat. We've got a satin finish on there. It's water-based because, you know, I try and keep with water-based products. It's got a water-based product on there. This, to you, if you're going over oil glosses, oil eggshells, anything that you're a bit unsure about, this would be a good, I hate the word go-to, this would be a good go-to undercoat to put over those surfaces. So that's why I'm going to use it. So the the basic idea today is we've got Doris with a bit of a colour on there, very much a bit of a colour. I will be putting on this now, you won't see me do it, some of this undercoat, let's call it just undercoat, primer undercoat, straight onto Doris, let it dry. I will come back and we'll do a bit of review what it's covered like, and then we'll be doing, I'm reaching, 2 coats of this acrylic wood and metal gloss. Now this is for interior use only, doesn't say exterior, and this is a non-yellowing because it's water-based. It's obviously not a hybrid if it's saying non-yellowing. Durable, quick drying formula, excellent flow and levelling, and this is in brilliant white. Now I have used this on a door, I've used a roller with it, and I've used it with a brush, nice brushes. I would say that the gloss level's not fantastic, but I want to give it another go in experimental environment using it on Doris the door, and we will see what it's like. So without further ado, I'm going to get my undercoat out. Brush of choice today, I will go with what we've done a lot of the testing of the products out, because we'll try and keep it regimented. I'm going to go with the Heritage. It's the Heritage brush from Knorr, and I'll give a shout out again, no sponsorship, Scott at Paint Monster. This is where I get these from, Scott at Paint Monster. I'll probably do a link to paintmonster.co.uk because these are a lovely brush to use if you're just starting out, if you're a bit unsure what brushes to go for. It's always one of those things that buy cheap, pay twice, because you'll be buying cheap brushes thinking, oh, they'll do for now, but sometimes you just want a little bit better quality bristle that's a bit of an all-rounder brush, and this is really nice. So yeah, don't hold me up, let's get this on and I will see you in a little while. I've got a heater down here, I can probably dry this off quite quickly and start getting a coat of gloss on a bit later today. This will be dry within about half an hour to an hour. Recoat a couple of hours probably, we'll see. See you in a bit. There we go, just coated that up. I can give you my initial thoughts on applying it because I've just done it. It's very thin. I'll say it's not watery thin, but let's put it this way. If you were doing bare surfaces, i.e. using it as the primer, going over bare wood because you're trying to block the knots or tanning of staining of wood, that doesn't need thinning. Just go as it is. If you were using it for a sprayer, airless sprayer, that don't need thinning. HVLP, you might just put a splash of water in it, but you might actually just trial and error try it, and it's thin enough to actually go straight through the machine. Probably a 1.5, 1.8 needle would be fine with that. Opacity, it's a little bit, you probably can't see it too well on camera. We are going over a bit of a dark colour, so this is why I do a dark colour and see what these opacities of the paints are like. It's grinning through a bit, quite to be expected because we are going over that green. It applies nicely because it does go on smoothly. It's not thick, you don't feel like you're trying to work the paint. You know, some of the paints I've tried before, the Aquaguard and some of the Dulux satin woods, they are a little bit thicker. They do, all of those Aquaguard creeps on you like a thief in the night. That being thinner, I'd expect that to start running on me. It's not actually, I've got no creeps, I can't see anything running or anything that's starting to sag, so that's good. Don't be put off with it being a little bit thinner, thinking, oh, it's not going to be doing what it needs to do. This should be stopping your knots, should be stopping any bleed through staining, because I mean it says on the tin, I mean it says there, prevents bleed through from wood knots. I'm expecting that would hold off knots. I would probably say if you were using it for stopping knots, go over those areas twice. And if it was a bare surface, I would advise you to give 2 coats of this before you start putting the glosses on. Or the gloss 2 coats. So I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to get the heater on now and going to wash that brush out. Got to sniff the bristle. Smell of that is quite... I'm trying to think, it's quite strong. It's some of the other brushes, some of the other bristles that I've smelt before we paint on are quite fruity sweet. This is... I can't really put... It's not an ammonia smell either. Maybe a little bit vinegary. Could be a bit vinegary. Hey ho, doesn't matter. Right, see you later. I've got to go and take the kids for a golf lesson and I'll be back later. So that should be nice and dry. Not going to bore you. That's what it's like when it's dry. That's the undercoat. I'm just starting to coat up with the gloss. A little bit grinning showing through. The opacity, it's not a total block out of the underlying green. What do we expect? But scratch test, what, an hour or so. Had the heater on it. That's tight. I'd expect that. So let me crack on. Let me get a coat of gloss and we'll review it once we've got first coat of gloss on. This will have 2 coats of gloss. You can hear the blower heater going. I've just finished that. You know, I like to just give you a bit of a... Let's just touch base on what it goes on like. First initial thoughts. Is it coloured water? Slightly. But to be fair, a lot of water-based glosses, and particularly being white, can feel a bit that way. In a wet state, the gloss level's not bad at the moment. They slightly dull off after it's dried. Opacity, that's where we come back to the coloured water. We'll see. That, yeah, looks like it needs about 10 coats, but I tell you what, let's let it dry. I'll give it an hour or so. I've got the blow heater on. There's a bit of air coming from behind me. It's just started to rain outside, so it's not the best environment to actually get stuff drying quite quick. But yeah, it goes on all right. It's a thinner paint to apply, and I can't say anymore. Hello. Do you know what? You know, when I said it just started raining, it slung it down and the kids' golf lesson got cancelled. So I've been doing some video editing on some future videos for you, or you might have already seen it. Anyway, that is dry. It's been a good probably 4 hours. What do I think? That's just 1 coat. I've gone quiet. Anyway, I've dropped a piece of tape down because I want to see what that's like with 1 coat compared to 2 coats. We know we had a dark colour underneath. So let's just see what the opacity coverage is like of this white paint. Colours are a lot better when they've got more pigment in from universal stainers and bits and pieces like that. I think you'd probably find that this would cover a lot better if we got a bit of a mixed colour, a bit of a grey, or even dark colours obviously. So let's just do this side of the door with the gloss. And I tell you what, I'll do it tonight because we're late on afternoon, well, a bit early evening, and I'm going to come to it tomorrow morning and I will do a recap on what it looks like. I'm not going to subject you to painting this because you know I can paint, and you know that the correct way of painting is mouldings, panels, yeah. All right, so let me crack on and I will see you in the morning when it's fully dried. Do you know what? I nearly lost the will to live applying that second coat on that. I'll see what it's like later on when it's dry. Come back to it tomorrow. Never mind. Right, welcome everybody. It's another day, another dollar. I've come back next day. You saw yesterday I did, well, we'll call it the second coat. So that is the second coat, and it was just a bit painful to put on. I think that's more of a case that we've got a surface that was quite dark and we were trying to get 3 coats, i.e. the primer, the knotting, stain blocking, whatever primer that we used. Well, I know it's not whatever, I know what we used. And 2 coats of the water-based gloss over the top, and I was probably expecting a bit too much from that. What I've done, because we're mid-morning now, first thing this morning I came and checked it, everything was nice and dry. I've actually, you've just seen me take tape off there and there. That section there, I have given another coat to. So that's actually had 3 coats of gloss, just to see whether an extra layer would obliterate, stroke, the opacity would be better over that green that we had. And it is better. Let's just put it this way. The 2 coats there, you won't know. It's very grinny around the edges, and I'm not saying any more on that. Let's go back. Let's just quickly go back to the basics. On undercoat, which was a nice, you saw I just did a bit of a scratch test after an hour or so and seemed all right. I'd expect that to be quite good on the surfaces I was going over, because we weren't on a problematic surface. So it gripped nicely. The undercoat was a little bit thin, but it went on fine. That's to be expected with a thinner coat, because the application is a lot easier. If it was a thicker undercoat, you might struggle. The first coat of gloss, it's gone on fine. The opacity, stroke, let's call it coverage, not brilliant. It's on, let's put it that way. But we can, if we can zoom you in, yeah, let's do that. We can see through it, and we call it grinning. In the trade, it's called grinning. It's grinning around the edges there, on the mouldings just there. That, again, that's to be expected when we've got only 1 coat of gloss over an undercoat. This is where we've got, let's bring it back a bit. This is where we've got this bit of a, not dilemma is not the right word. This is where we get a bit of confusion when we've got to do 2 coats of a top coat, gloss, eggshell, satin, over undercoats. It helps with the opacity and the coverage over the surfaces that we're going. So we did 1 there, then yesterday we did a second gloss, and yes, your gloss goes on better on itself. That layering system where it helps enhance the gloss finish is needed with 2 coats of top coat. That's why a lot of water-based paints need 2 coats of the top coat, because the first coat soaks into that drier undercoat and it loses that, let's call it lackluster, it just loses a little bit of sheen. If I look across this, it's a shiny surface. I'm not saying it's full gloss. It's a shiny surface, but it's not as glossy as having 2. And it's definitely not as glossy as having 3. So the more gloss coats you can put on, the better. Like back in the day, if you were into your proper oil-based glosses, you'd leave probably a day until it's really dried off. You get some very fine sandpaper, 400 probably worn, wet and dry, sand it down, and you'd give another coat of gloss to build it up. And wet and dry sanding gives you a lovely finish for oil-based paints. So even 20, 30, 40 years ago, double layering gloss coats was a thing then. So it's not anything new now. Right, it's moving on, because I don't want to keep you half an hour. That extra coat, i.e. 3rd coat of gloss, 4th coat total, is a lot better. I've got a little bit of grinning around these moulding edges there. The gloss level is improved. It's not quite, if we go from a 0 to 100% in gloss, and you'd expect an oil gloss, Sickens XD, brilliant oil-based paint for gloss. If call that 100, what would I say this? 70, 75, 80. It's not fantastic. It looks shiny, and if I stand across it, it is a shiny surface, passable for gloss, comparing it to an eggshell or a satin. So you go gloss, satin, eggshell. You know what I mean? It looks glossy. But I think my expressions say it all. Application wise, it went on lovely. To get that extra coat on, I did load it slightly, just to make sure I was getting the amount of paint on there to help it cover. It is a lot better. It will probably benefit from an extra coat. I'm not going to be doing that. If we'd got a colour that was underneath it that was lighter, you would quite possibly be fine with an undercoat and then 2 gloss coats over it. I was pushing the boundary, wasn't I, to see what it was like. But it's interesting when it's actually sold as a paint with good coverage and things like that. If you were going over a white or a light cream colour, you'd expect it covering, and you possibly wouldn't know whether it was grinning on these edges or not, because you've got a light colour coming through. We've done a dark colour, and the dark colour is showing. So this is why I want to do this, an experiment. It's a bit of an experiment to see what it's like. I'd like to know how these paint manufacturers, and Valspar Trade is a Sherwin-Williams owned company, and I would like to know how they do their testing of paint before they market it and actually put it out to the general public. Because I can remember Gary, I'm going to not mention surnames, Gary, who works for Brewers now, back in the day when he worked for MacDougall Rose stroke Dulux Robinsons of Nottingham. Oh, hello Gary, he'll be watching. I can remember when he organised, let's call it a field trip, like a school field trip down to ICI Dulux, back when Dulux was ICI, and we went down to Slough to see how they tested paints. And I remember seeing boards with crisscross black and white trellis effects, and they were testing all different paints out. They were rolling it, they were brushing it, and they were seeing how that black or how white was affected by the paint that they went over that surface. Are they still doing that? Because surely you wouldn't release paints that don't cover well over darker colours. You'd put something in it to body it up. Quite possibly. Hopefully. Right, I've waffled enough. Would I be using this as my go-to gloss paint? No, quite possibly not. I've still got a bit of a stigma, and I know people are shouting at me. If the paint's good, you can buy it from anywhere you want. B&Q, it's more, to me, it's a bit of a retail paint, even though it says trade on that Valspar tin. Yeah, I get my 10% off because I've got a trade point card through the National Residential Landlord Association, so I do get my 10% off. But I think if you're a DIYer or somebody just popping into a shop just to get a tin of paint, you can give it a go. It's not a bad paint to apply once you know what you're doing with it. And to be fair, I've loaded that section just there. Do you know what? I haven't got any runs on that coming, and that was loaded. It's not creeping like... I don't need to mention the paint that I get runs and creeps on. There's no creeps on the edges. It's not running. It's not sagging. It's actually gone on nicely. And that's just with the straightforward Heritage, the Knorr Heritage brush. I'll shout out to Scott again. Thanks very much for supplying me with these brushes. They are very nice. And it's gone on all right. Loading it with a brush gives you a better application of the paint than I would say doing it with a roller, because you'd probably brush these edges and roll it all out, and you'd be rolling the paint out and not getting that layer of paint thick enough to get the opacity stroke coverage. That's just personal. That's just probably a personal thing about knowing how paints get spread out if you're rolling it, but no. So going back to price wise, 2.5 litres you're getting for about 25, 26, 27 pounds. And the other thing I'd say, it does wash out quite nicely, so there's no hybrid element that it jiggers your brushes. It's not a brush killer. So I would say give it a go. Everybody's going to be different. You can see by my ring light I am getting a shiny gloss finish to it, but again, is there better paints out there? Yes. Is there better paints out there that cost a bit more money? Yes. We've pushed it a bit, haven't we, because we've done a dark colour. But hey ho, that's better, but in effect it's had 4 coats. Can we manage that? Can we manage 4 coats on a job? The beauty is it's touch dry in an hour, recoat time 2 to 4. So we could get an extra coat on in a day, couldn't we, if we needed to? Do you know what? No smell. So I'll leave it at that. No smell.